The Kingdom Wrapped in Fog, Chapter 2. The Minds That Fell into Madness. We meet again by fire, wandering soul. Last time I told you of the fog, of the gates of Boletaria, of the nexus where lost souls gathered like moss around a candle, and of the little monumental who opened its ancient eyes and spoke of a world slowly being devoured. It told me that the Old One had awakened, that demons had spread through the kingdom, that souls were being gathered like grain before winter, and that if the fog was not stopped, the world itself would one day disappear beneath it. Different people react differently when faced with news as big as the world and as heavy as a mighty titan. Some try to flee, forgetting how futile it is. Some hope that trouble will not come. Some pick up arms and stand tall. All of them want to live, a sensible thing to wish for. But for me, death had already taken me once. The Nexus had brought me back, and once a person has been returned from death with a task in hand, they begin to make strange decisions. Or maybe I've lost part of my soul and reason. So I stood before the archstones, 5 ancient stones, each waiting in silence, each one a door, each one a warning. The first had led me to the gates of Boletaria, where soldiers without soul still guarded a kingdom without hope. The others waited. One seemed cold, as though wind and rain lived inside it. One seemed quiet, but not peaceful. One smelled faintly of rot, though no rot could be seen. And one glowed as if fire slept beneath its skin. That was the one I chose. Not because it looked safe, it did not. Not because it looked welcoming, it most certainly did not. But because I had begun to understand something about this cursed land. Every path led somewhere terrible. The only choice was which terrible place to walk into first. So I placed my hand upon the stone. The nexus vanished, and the mountain opened its mouth. Stonefang was not a city, not anymore. Perhaps once it had been. Perhaps once men had sung there as they worked. Perhaps once lanterns had glowed warmly over the tables where miners shared bread, ale, and stories from home. But when I arrived, I found only tunnels. Tunnels above me, tunnels beneath me, tunnels stretching into the darkness like veins through the body of some sleeping giant. The air was thick with smoke and heat. Every breath tasted of iron. Every stone sweated. Somewhere far below, furnaces roared like beasts, chained in the deep. And from every direction came the sound of hammering. Clang, clang, clang. Not lively hammering, not the cheerful rhythm of craftsmen at work. The sound was hollow, endless, hopeless, like a heart that had forgotten why it beats. The people of Stonefang had been miners. That much was clear. Their picks still struck stone, their carts still rolled along broken tracks, their furnaces still burned, but the men themselves, no, they were not men anymore. Not truly. They were short, broad creatures with skin like cooled ash and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Some carried pickaxes, some dragged sacks of ore behind them as though commanded by a master no one else could see. They did not speak, they did not rest, they only worked. Pickaxe rose, pickaxe fell, pickaxe rose, pickaxe fell, again and again and again. At first I thought they had not noticed me. Then one turned, slowly. Its glowing eyes fixed upon mine. It raised its pickaxe and charged. Here I learned another lesson. Do not mistake a miner for a harmless man simply because he is small. A pickaxe, when applied with conviction, is a very persuasive argument. I raised my shield. The blow ran through my arm all the way to the shoulder. Another miner joined the first, then another. Soon I was backing through the tunnel, while a crowd of furious little workers attempted to correct my existence. I fought poorly, then slightly less poorly, then poorly again. A flaming lizard crawled from a crack in the stone and spat fire at my feet. A bag of something explosive rolled toward me. A miner struck me in the side. I fell. I died. Again. I am aware that in most tales, death carries more dignity. In mine, death often arrived with less ceremony. Sometimes by a demon, sometimes by a pebble. When I awoke once more in the Nexus, I stayed still for a time. The candles flickered. The maiden in black stood not far away, silent as ever. No one seemed surprised. No one asked me if I was well. This, I decided, was rude. Then I understood. To the soul-bound, death was no longer an ending. It was a door, a painful door, a humiliating door, a door I would prefer not to walk through often, but a door nonetheless. So I got up, checked if my bones remembered their proper arrangement, and returned to Stonefang, because apparently I had become that sort of person. The deeper I went into the mines, the stranger they became. At first, Stonefang seemed merely ruined, a place of labor, heat, and misery. But then I began to see the machines. Great wooden wheels taller than houses, chains as wide as tree trunks, elevators that groaned as though they hated being awakened, gears large enough to crush a horse. Some contraptions still moved, others had collapsed into tangled heaps of metal and timber. They looked less like tools made by men and more like toys abandoned by giants. I began to wonder what sort of hunger required such machines. How much ore could one kingdom need? How deep could man dig before the earth itself grew angry? The answer, as I would learn, was very, very deep indeed. As I crept through one of the upper passages, something bright skittered across the ground. It was a tiny creature made of crystal and nervous energy. Its back glittered with gems, its feet scratched against stone. For one foolish moment, I forgot where I was. I thought it was beautiful. Then it squeaked and ran. Naturally, I chased it. This was also foolish. The little creature darted around a corner, and I followed with all the grace of a person who had learned nothing from dying repeatedly. Behind the corner waited 3 miners, 1 flaming lizard, and a hole in the floor. The crystal creature vanished. I nearly followed it into the hole. There is a lesson here. If treasure runs away from you in a cursed mine, perhaps let it go. I did not learn this lesson immediately, or ever really. It was beautiful, but eventually, with effort, repetition, and several near-death experiences, I began to understand. Past the traps, the tunnels narrowed, the heat worsened, stone gave way to blackened walls, webbing clung to the corners, not soft white webbing like one finds in barns. This was thick, metallic, charred in places. It stretched across the passage like chains spun by a hateful spider. At the far end of the tunnel, something waited, a beast of armor and flame. The armored spider. It did not look born, it looked built, as if some mad smith had dreamt of a spider, a furnace, and a siege engine, then decided the world needed all 3 in one body. Its legs scraped against stone, its eyes burned like coals, its body was plated in dark metal. And when it breathed, the tunnel filled with fire. There was nowhere to circle it, nowhere to flank it. The passage was too narrow. The beast guarded its lair like a dragon guarding a bridge in an old tale. To reach it, I had to walk directly into its hatred. It spat fire. I raised my shield. It filled the corridor with webbing. I tore myself free. It slammed its legs against the stone, and the whole tunnel shook. I advanced step by step, too slow, and the flame would take me, too fast, and I would be caught in webbing, too fearful, and I would never reach it at all. So I learned the rhythm: fire, shield, web, roll, step, fire, shield, step, step, strike, again, again, and again. At last the great spider screamed. Its furnace-like eyes dimmed, its metal body collapsed into the ash, and beyond it the mine opened up, downward, always downward. Stonefang did not invite visitors deeper, it swallowed them. Then came the glowing orbs. At first I mistook them for lanterns. Small floating lights drifted through the tunnels, casting a strange golden glow over the stone. They bobbed gently in the air, almost peacefully, almost kindly. I approached one. It hummed. The sound was soft, curious, like a bee trapped behind the glass. Then it exploded. I survived, mostly. After that, I treated every glowing object in Stonefang with the proper suspicion, which is to say, I struck them from a distance whenever possible and hid behind anything sturdy whenever they drifted too close. Fairy tales often tell children not to follow lights in the dark places. This is a good advice, especially if the lights are filled with fire. Somewhere in those tunnels, I met a man named Patches. Now, wandering soul, there are many kinds of smiles in this world. There is the smile of a friend, the smile of a merchant, the smile of a child hiding stolen sweets, and then there is the smile of a man who has already decided where to bury a body. Patches has the last kind. He waved at me as though we were old companions. He called me friend. This was the first warning. He spoke warmly. This probably was the second. He told me there was treasure nearby. This was the third, fourth, and fifth. I should have left. Instead, I gave him a benefit of a doubt. Because while I had begun to understand deaths, demons, cursed kingdoms, and exploding orbs, I had not yet learned to mistrust a cheerful man in a cave half filled with molten stone. Patches pointed ahead. "There! Look there! A fine prize just waiting," he said. And there was indeed a prize. There also was a trap, a very obvious trap in hindsight. The trouble with hindsight is that it always arrives after the fall. But not all trouble bad, and sometimes I do survive. And there stood Patches, somehow surprised that I had returned. He gave me another smile, a smaller one this time, the kind worn by men who suddenly remember that apologies are cheaper than funerals. I considered many responses. Most involved my sword. In the end, I let him live, not because he deserved it, but because in a land of demons, one occasionally grows curious to see how long a bug can survive. Patches, as it turned out, was very good at surviving. After even more exploration, I found another forge, not like the small forge in the Nexus. No, a whole smithy workshop, and blocked by contraption that may have been silent for many years until I turned it on again. At the heart of it all stood a blacksmith. He was tiny. His arms looked like they were carved out from stone. His name was Ed. Blacksmith Ed. He did not greet me warmly. This, oddly, made me trust him more than Patches. Blacksmith Ed was not a courtly craftsman. He did not speak in riddles. He did not smile unless something was very funny, and very little in Stonefang seemed funny to him. But his forge still burned, his hammer still fell, and in a place where so many had forgotten themselves, Ed remembered his work. There was something comforting about that. Not soft comfort, not kind comfort, the comfort of a mountain that refuses to move. Ed knew weapons. He knew demon souls. He knew that some things could be forged only with power stolen from monsters. He was perhaps not the gentlest of souls, but he was useful. And in this land, useful was often better than gentle. I left him with respect, and with a vague suspicion that if the demons ever reached his forge, they would regret it. The tunnels below Ed's forge changed. The mine began to feel older, less like a place men had built, more like a place men had uncovered. Stone walls gave way to ruins. Ruins gave way to bones, not human bones, larger, older, dragon bones, perhaps. Ribs arched overhead like the remains of a cathedral. Skulls lay half buried in ash, their empty eye sockets large enough to crawl through. I stood among them for a long time. The miners had not discovered treasure. They had discovered a graveyard. And still they dug deeper. That is the curse of greed. It never believes the warning signs are meant for it. When the earth gives up iron, greed asks for gold. When it gives up gold, greed asks for souls. When it gives up bones the size of houses, greed says, surely there is something greater beneath. And sometimes there is. In the deepest furnace of Stonefang, I found a demon made of rage, the flame lurker. It crouched in a cavern of molten stone, its body burning from within. Fire dripped from its limbs. Its eyes blazed white hot. Its claws struck the ground and sent sparks leaping like frightened insects. It was not graceful. I don't think it was clever. It was fury wearing a body. Every movement was an explosion. Every breath was heat. Every roar struck the chest like a hammer. I had faced spiders, soldiers, miners, and many other unpleasant things by then. But the flame lurker was different. It did not guard a door. It did not hold a position. It wanted only to destroy whatever stood before it, which unfortunately was me. Now I should tell you something. A wiser warrior might have prepared carefully. A wiser warrior might have chosen a long spear, or magic, or perhaps a weapon that allowed one to stand a reasonable distance from the demon made entirely of fire. I looked down at my hands. In them I held fist weapons, iron knuckles, for punching. I looked back at the flame lurker. It roared. The cavern shook. I considered my choices. Then I sighed and raised my fists. There are moments in life when one must admit the plan is terrible. There are also moments when the terrible plan is already in motion. This was both. The flame lurker charged. I moved aside, mostly. It struck the ground where I had been standing, and fire burst outward in a ring. The heat washed over me. My cloak smoked. My courage also smoked. I ran. It followed. I struck its side with one iron fist. The blow landed. The demon noticed. This was not ideal. It turned and looked at me with an expression of a volcano that had been insulted by a hamster. Again it charged. Again I dodged. Again I struck. Little by little I learned it. Not perfectly. The flame lurker was too wild for perfection, but I learned the space between its fury. The pause after a leap, the breath before a roar, the heartbeat after its claws struck stone. There. That was where I lived, survived at least. In the small spaces between deaths, I punched fire. This sounds unwise, because it is. My arms ached, my armor burned. Several times I was certain I had died and simply had not fallen over yet. But each blow mattered. Iron against flame, stubbornness against fury, stubbornness of iron knuckles that have amazing stagger power, as it turns out. A nameless fool against a demon that should never have been fought at arm's length. At last the flame lurker stopped. Its fire dimmed. Its roar became a broken sound. I struck once more. The cavern flashed. The demon fell. And for a moment all Stonefang seemed quiet. I stood there, breathing smoke, half buried, and fully amazed to still exist. If anyone ever tells you that victory always feels noble, do not believe them. Sometimes victory feels like coughing, limping, and wondering what possessed you to punch a demon made of fire. Beyond the flame lurker, the mountain opened into a chamber too vast for reason. At first I thought I was looking at a wall, a great black wall of scale and stone. Then the wall moved. Eyes opened, golden, ancient, larger than a shield. The air left my lungs. The dragon god had awoken. No song had prepared me for it. No tale had made it large enough. Dragons in stories are often described as beasts. This was not a beast. This was a mountain that knew how to breathe. Its horns scraped the cavern roof. Its hands could have crushed towers. Chains and ancient mechanisms surrounded it, built by people who must have known exactly what they found beneath the earth. Not treasure, not ore, not power, a god. And because men are men, they had tried to bind it. The dragon god saw me. The world became fire. I did not fight it. Let that be clear. I survived it. There is a difference. A knight might fight a soldier. A hunter may fight a beast. A fool may attempt to fight a flame lurker with his fists. But no one fights a god beneath a mountain. One hides, one runs, one prays at the enormous eyes, looks elsewhere. Broken pillars stood through the chamber, and I moved between them like a mouse crossing a kitchen floor, while the cook searched for the knife. When the dragon turned away, I ran. When it looked toward me, I froze. When its fists struck the stone, the cavern shattered. Rubble rained from above. The sound was not a crash. It was the world ending in one room. Then I saw the ancient weapons, great ballista built in the chamber walls, siege engines aimed not at armies, but at the god itself. The forgotten people of Stonefang had prepared for this. Perhaps they had feared the dragon would wake. Perhaps they had always intended to kill it. Either way, their machines remained. So I reached the first, forced the mechanism to move. The wood cracked, the chain snapped tight, the weapon fired, the bolt struck. The dragon god screamed. The mountain screamed with it. Fire filled the chamber. Stone split. I ran again to the second weapon, through dust, through flame, through the shadow of a hand large enough to erase me. The second ballista waited like a judgment. I pulled the lever. The bolt flew. The dragon god fell. Not dead. Not yet, but wounded, bound, brought low by the machines built in the depths of greed. I approached. Every step felt wrong. The creature's breath still shook the floor. Its eyes watched me. Not with fear, not even with hatred, with something older, something tired. For the first time, I wondered if the dragon god was a monster, or merely the greatest prisoner of Stonefang. But wondering did not change what had to be done. I raised my weapon and ended it. When I returned to the Nexus, the air felt cold, clean, almost gentle. The maiden in black waited where she always did, face hidden beneath wax and shadows. She said little. She rarely needed to elaborate. The soul I carried from Stonefang burned like a coal inside my chest. Heavy, powerful, terrible. The archstone behind me grew still. The mountain had given up its demon, but it had not given up its lesson. Stonefang had not fallen because demons arrived. The demons came after. The fall began long before. It began with one more tunnel, one more vein of ore, one more machine, one more treasure beneath the earth, one more voice saying, "Deeper, farther, more." That was what I learned in the mines. Greed does not always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears a mask of need. Sometimes it carries a pickaxe. Sometimes it builds machines larger than houses and calls them progress. Sometimes, if it digs deep enough, it wakes God. I stood before the remaining archstones. The nexus candles flickered around me. Somewhere below, the maiden whispered prayers I did not understand. Somewhere above, the monumental watched and remembered. 3 stones still waited. One smelled of rain and old battlefields. One of sickness and sorrow. And one stood silent as a tower full of secrets. If Stonefang had shown me what greed could awaken beneath the earth, then I wondered what man might awaken in search of knowledge. The thought chilled me. Still I stepped forward, for I was soul-bound, and the fog was not yet finished with me. But that, wandering soul, is a tale for another time. Thank you for listening this far. I hope we will meet again, beyond the time where Dragon God slumbers peacefully.